The first breath of dawn bled pale over the bight, the sea taking its light with grudging sips. White Harbor's long stone quays, rhymed to the color of old bone, ran out like fingers into black water where ice drifted in splintered panes that clinked and whispered. Ropes creaked, spars ticked. A gull, stubborn and raw-throated, made a noise like an old hinge. Men in sealskin and wool stamped their boots and breathed vapors that rose like the prayers of poorer folk. Jon walked the harbor with his cloak drawn snug, Ghost pacing silent at his heel. The direwolf's breath came like the sea's, steady and icing the air. The snow had quit in the night, but the cold had not, and it outlined the world with a hard edge. The frost-white fur bristling on the beast's scruff, the hard glitter on the iron of chain, each grain in the stone. The carved merman over the Manderley counting house stared at the gray horizon with a patience older than kings. He had known the sea as a boy only from a cliff near Winterfell, where it was a far band of hammered blue, and to him it had seemed a thing that belonged to songs and men with Southron mouths and feathered cloaks. All that was changed. Winter had a way of making a man's world smaller and larger at once. Now the sea was a road, more perilous than any road he'd ever taken, and the road that would have to be taken just the same. He had not chosen to be a king. The words had chosen him like a wind chooses a torch. "The tide is turning," said a voice at his side. Davos Seaworth's face looked like old rope. He had a seaman's balance even upon the slick frost, his weight easy, his eye canted toward the water. He had lost finger bones long ago, and the scars had the waxy sheen of rope burns healed over badly. The onion sigil at his breast was sketched in cheap paint and newer than the rest of his gear. It seemed almost shy among the stags and flayed men and mermen the North had gathered. "So are other things," Jon said. "Aye." Davos's breath smoked. "And not all in our favor. Look, out beyond the quays, out where the harbor widened to the White Knife's mouth. A thin skein of mist lay low. It had risen before the dawn and now was lifting with it, as though the water had drawn a blanket to its chin and was now pushing it away. At the edge where mist frayed into air, the black back of a longship slid, ghost quiet, as if the sea had birthed it rather than borne it. Not ironborn, not yet. Manderley men in a longboat, ferrying out net booms to hold in place should they need to bar the harbor again. They looked small as mites. "Men don't think about tides, Lord," Davos said. He had taken to calling him Lord again when they began speaking of ships. "They think about the wind and what they can see. The sea has teeth you only feel when you're already bleeding." The city behind them was waking, the smell of smoke and brine. White Harbor was not the North in many ways. Stone streets, tiled roofs, oil lamps that cast yellow coins of light at night, bread still warm and full of spice. But in winter its bones were North through and through. Men with hard hands and eyes went to their work without talk. Fishwives emptied buckets of slush into gutters and sluiced them with brine so the ice would take longer to catch. Somewhere a bell tolled thin, frostbound. "We'll meet Lord Manderley now," Jon said. "Best to be before his porridge." "Aye," Davos said, and grinned. "That'll be an hour." The merman's court was warm in a way that made cold feel meaner outside. Tall windows, set deep, showed only a smear of pale light. Wyman Manderley sat in a chair that looked more like a device made by a cook than a carpenter, curving arms like pastry baked too long. He was as broad as the seat and pink from the heat, with hair like thin snow and eyes like small oysters. He had a napkin tucked at his throat, though he had no plate before him yet. At his elbow were ledgers and a board with little ivory men moved by a thin clerk's hands. That must be ships or coins or freights. A boy, pale as milk and pretty as a seal, stood behind him with a flagon of warmed wine. Whether he was a son or a squire or both could be guessed in a dozen ways and still be answered wrong. "Your Grace." The words creaked out of Wyman like a door. "You walk early." "Lord Manderley," Jon said and bowed. He had never grown used to the iron taste of such words. He thought of Robb's face and then of his father's, a face of winter and law, and he held still. "I like the harbor quiet. All men like things quiet until they're dead," Wyman said with a generous smile that could be taken two ways. "Sit," See, see, if there is porridge left by the time that man brings it, you shall have some. He pointed at the clerk and then let his finger travel to the ivory men. These are ships. They do not take kindly to men who walk them too much with their mouths. Davos inclined his head with that half-reverence, half-mockery that only a low-born knight could carry. They like it when you walk them with an oar. First words spoken in this court worth a turn, Wyman said. To business. The wolf would be a merman. The sea will not be pleased to be part of the forest, but we can arrange introductions. Jon smiled despite himself. We'll need the river barges emptied and their crews on the sea cogs. We'll need pitch and tow. We'll need more grapnels and boarding hooks than you think wise. And if you hold booms for fishing seasons, we'll need to deploy them wider. Ah! Wyman steepled fingers that looked like small hams. Not a man for half measures. Good, good. The Ironborn are wolves of a sort. They come like winter and take as they like. When they have gone, you count what is left and what is not. The sea cogs we can give you and the men besides. I will not give you the porridge cook. I will need him. As to the booms, we use them for run of salmon and herring. They might hold a bold ship in a river mouth. At sea they will be a prayer. Rope. Davos said. But prayers can trip a man if he's not watching his feet. Wyman's eyes glittered. Lord Seaworth speaks as though he has tripped men himself with prayers. So, there are matters of debt. Always there are matters of debt. I will speak of them after. For now, there are matters of blood. That should be simpler. He peered at Jon, and his smile went away. There is a crow who has flown from King's Landing to the Sisters. Euron Greyjoy has been seen off Long Sister, as he promised he would be seen wherever the folk of men made fire on the shore. He is a crow that loves the land as much as the sky. He takes his dark with him. Gods, Davos muttered. Jon felt Ghost's flank brush his boot. The dire wolf moved nearer the hearth. How many ships? Jon asked. Is there any man who has counted the sea and found a number? Wyman asked, but he sobered. 20 at Long Sister. 40 last seen at the step of Sweet Sister. The sister men say 3 times that number scattered beyond sight, darting in and out of the mists, like flies over a bleeding mare. His lips pursed. They say the ship with the red sails was there. They say its crew made no sound. Davos exhaled through his nose, a thin, tight sound. Silence. So they name it, Wyman said. And why not? If a man has his men's tongues cut out, he has told the world that his listening is more dear than their speaking. That is a kind of piety. Jon saw again the first carving he had ever seen of a kraken. Too many limbs, too many eyes, a mouth that pretended teeth where there were only hooks for holding. He had thought it cartoonish then. He did not now. He will come for White Harbor. He will come to watch and see where he can tug threads and hear which ones make men cry out loudest, Wyman said. He lifted a goblet, sipped, and set it down with a hand that did not look as though it could be gentle but was. Men say Euron Greyjoy has a black wind he keeps in a bag. Men say he has blue robbers to drink with him and they tell him stories from far countries. Men say he has a horn that will make dragons weep blood. Men say whatever it pleases them to say, so they need not say he plans. Wyman smiled again. He plans. Jon looked at Davos, who looked at the sea through the window though he could not see it. If we take the sea, Jon said, we will have to make him come where the sea is small. Davos turned. The Sisters. We do not own the Sisters, Wyman said mildly. They have their own lords and their own gods, who are as mercantile as any merchant in my counting houses. But they are practical men, and when the sea is rough they sell their gods at a fair price. He turned a palm upward. I have a letter from Godric Burrell of Sweet Sister. He was kind enough to tell me that he does not care who the king is as long as he is not forced to care. He has pilots who can bring men through the shoals in the mists when the wind is from the east and the tide is in its sulks. He has an eye like a coin for debt. He will sell us a kindness and ask us to pay for a favor we have yet to ask. I like him. Send for him, Jon said. I have sent, Wyman said. He sent something back. The boy with the flagon moved without being told and handed Davos a roll of hard-tarred canvas. Davos unrolled it on Wyman's lapgirth. Within, oiled against damp, was a chart. Pale lines on darker vellum, ink faded to the color of low bruises. The sisters were 3 tiers on the water. The shoals were sketched in little scars, 100, 1,000, the places that knew the bones of men. A current was marked with arrows like thin knives, all pointing south and east. "Good," Davos said softly. He traced a finger along a mark that might have been a reef or a suggestion of one. "That will catch a man who is too proud to look down." "Euron is many things," Jon said. "Pride is one." "He's not a fool at sea," Davos said. "He's a kraken. That's a kind of wisdom too." Ghost's ears flattened at a draft that came no one knew whence. The flames in the brazier shook, then steadied. Somewhere in the city a hammer began its rhythm. Jon thought of a boy he had been who knew the feel of wood under a hand but had never felt a deck sway. He thought of the men who might die because of his thinking. He carried their faces in his mind without names. Their namelessness made them heavier. "Send another letter to Godric Borel," Jon said. "Tell him the king in the north asks his hand on the tiller. Tell him the king in the north will pay." He looked at Wyman. "What do you want in return?" Wyman clucked. "Want? The list would make a sept hungry. But perhaps we will begin with smaller things. Do not let your men burn the sisters' salterns if they grow vexed. Let the sistermen sell their fish at fair price at Winterfell when Winterfell is a market again. Allow me to name the master of ports here and not have a boy from the fingers do it for gold. The great things will come after. Small coins rise to a heap, your grace. The North remembers." "The North remembers," Jon said. "Good," Wyman said. "Then the North will remember to eat breakfast." He reached with 2 fingers that could have been a piglet's legs and pulled a bell. It was not breakfast that came with the boy. There were sausages and bread and porridge besides, true, and small sweet onions stewed to translucency. But with the platters came 2 men flanked by guards with wool-wrapped spears. One was lean as a shadow and had a mouth like a gouge in old wood. His shoulders sloped as though he thought it ill-mannered to show his height. The other moved slowly, as if each step must be counted and weighed so it would not slip. He had a face like a child made of rawhide left too long near the fire. His hair was thin and dull as a mouse's back. He had 3 fingers missing on his left hand and 2 on his right. Ghost rose before Jon told him to. The direwolf's lip peeled back to a sound that might have been a word if men had been wolves. "A guest," Wyman said, without seeming to be surprised that Ghost had fangs worth notice. "He came 2 days ago on a fisher's skiff under a rotten sail, and the skiff was stolen if the fisherman's wife is to be believed. And what woman's wife is not to be believed when she speaks of her husband's property? He asked to kiss your hand. I told him he could kiss my foot. He did not. He said he would wait for you." The slow-moving one, the rawhide-faced one, lifted his head. His eyes were gray and full of salt. Jon felt something in him give way like ice under a boot and then hold. "Theon," he said. Theon Greyjoy swallowed, and the swallow made a hard work of itself. "My lord," Theon said, and his voice tried to be something it could not quite be anymore. "Your grace." Davos's mouth tightened and then loosened like a rope worked by a tide. There was a murmur from the guards. Wyman's boy with the flagon poured wine without spilling a drop, which was the bravest act in the chamber. Jon let Ghost's shoulder lean into his knee until the animal's weight made that knee ache. He looked at Theon and remembered a boy he had not liked much, and a man he had come to hate for a time, and a thing with teeth where his shame should be. He remembered, too, that he had told a girl of a burned tower that she would be safe because Theon Greyjoy had done a brave thing and he had not liked it, and it had been true. Winter makes the lines between men like the lines between land and water, clear when the wind is right and a lie the next day. "You should kill me," Theon said. He did not move. "The North would like you better." "The North does not like many men," Wyman observed, and bit into a sausage. "Why are you here?" Jon asked. "I know my uncle," Theon said, "and I know the sisters." He half smiled, and the smile was the first human thing about him. The sisters do not know me anymore. That is for the best. He lifted his hands as if offering them in proof. But I can thread a needle in that water with my eyes stung from salt. And I know my uncle. He is not like other reavers anymore. He thinks men are made to be whittled, and he will carve them in any shape if he thinks it will please him. He is drunk on more than wine. He is afraid of nothing but boredom. He will come as close as he can to your harbor because he does not believe anything would dare to make him pay for it. Wyman dabbed his mouth. You will die if you lie to me, Theon, son of Balon. I have died before, Theon said. It did not take. Speak to me of silence, Davos said, voice flat. Theon's eyes flickered to him, and something like fear or respect there. She has 20 oars aside and another 10 to be manned if the wind dies or he wants to run men down when they have not had strength to run farther. Her crew do not speak because they cannot. They are big men, not like most Ironers. He likes them for that. He has gold for them. He has other things for them I will not speak of. His hands twisted as if to wring water from them. He lifts his red sails only when he is sending a message. He will lift them when he wants you to know he sees you and sees through you. Arms? Davos asked. Are there scorpions? Crossbows big enough to put a bolt through a cow and pin it to a wall, Theon said. Hooks he throws out on ropes with barbs like boar tusks. Grape shot. He likes to hit a man's face. It makes his men laugh. He laughs with them and then at them. He swallowed. He has casks of a blue drink, and he drinks it before battle sometimes, and then he looks at men like he wishes them to be fish. Shade of the evening, Davos said softly, as if spitting something bitter.
Kartaen puisun sap.
Jon had seen stranger things than poison in his time. He had seen eyes go as red as ghosts and then go glass and finally gray. He had seen blue eyes in a face that had no right to eyes. He felt cold that had nothing to do with drafts. Will he chase if run? He will if he thinks he is leading you, Theon said. He will not if he thinks you are running. He smiled at Jon as at a man who might be money, and he bowed to Wyman with a small irony that made Wyman chuckle. The tide in the channel. Between Sweet Sister and Long Sister is a dog looks one way and pisses the other, Godric said with courtesy. If you do not know where it looks, you end with piss in your boots. The shoals are patient. The fog is a vixen. If a man thinks a wind is his friend there, it will show itself to be his mother-in-law. Your words are poetry, Godric, Wyman said. If you had a bard, I would weigh him. I have two, Godric said. I keep them under the stairs and feed them fish when they rhyme by accident. When they rhyme on purpose, I beat them. Davos laughed, brief and genuine. What say you to a chain boom? I say a chain boom will seek its own depth there and find it, which is on a sandbar where it cannot do you any good. Godric glanced at Theon, not unkindly. We will use nets and hope he thinks we are fishing. We will show him lights where there is no channel, Theon said. He did not look at Jon when he spoke. He had taken to staying near the Mormonts as though they were a wall he could trust not to fall on him. And we will hide the dark where there is. He has a pilot who believes he cannot be deceived. He will be deceived if he thinks he cannot be. Fine, Wyman said. Fine. Fine. Men like plans. The sea less so, but it will do. They went out under gray noon 2 days later when the wind swung to the east and the mist began to snarl at the low water. The white knife's mouth was a crusted throat, the floes bumping like skulls. Cogs with wolf-shed pennants moved heavily into the black water beyond. Sails furled until they had room to unfurl them. The scorpions looked like strange beasts sleeping on deck. The longships the Manderleys had purchased from Bravisman years ago, back when such a thought would have seemed either an extravagance or a joke, moved among the cogs like hounds among cattle. Godric's cutter skipped across like a boy over a stream. On the largest cog, Jon stood wrapped in fur and iron and watched the wake. Ghost stood with his paws on the gunwale. His red eyes narrowed as if looking for scent in something that had none. Davos kept his maps under a plank secured by wedges, and he bent over them with Godric and Theon and 3 of the Mormonts, while outside men blessed themselves with the 7, or with tree signs, or put a coin under their tongue because coins bought things from the dead in the stories old women told. Silence will strike the largest and cut it down and then go for the second largest, Theon said. He likes to show men that their bigness is a lie. He does not favor line battles. He favors breaking lines. We won't give him a line, Davos said. We'll give him a tangle. He won't see it until he's in it. But he smells rope, Godric said. You've never smelt a man so fond of rope. Jon nodded. Then we will invite him to smell it. Evening came late, as if it too was wary of the shoals. The 3 sisters slouched on the horizon like seals asleep. Fires began to wink in Sisterton and were answered by smaller fires farther inland, the way villages make themselves known to each other by light. Godric's men set 2 lanterns high on a spar hauled up the mainmast. One shone steady, one hooded and blinked. The code was not one Jon knew, and he had not asked. He did not need to know. He had a role in this, and it was not to be clever about lights. Fog came up like a thing offended by the noise of men. It slid across decks and swallowed hulls and then let them go and then drew them near again as if rocking them for the sport of it. The sisters' shoals were hunger beneath it. Men spoke less. A man who had laughed will snort when silence becomes too big. No one snorted. Sometime after midnight, when the fog tattered and the tide turned in its doggish way, Godric pointed with his chin. He could have been pointing at the fog. He could have been pointing at a whale's exhale. He could have been pointing at death. There, where night had a faint seam in it, something darker was cutting toward them. Then another, then the third. Like beetles on black milk, Euron scouts moved without light. They will be in number behind, Davos said. They always are. If we show a stern, they'll run our bow, one of the Mormonts said without interest. If we show a bow, they'll leap our stern. Left or right they'll try. I don't see the problem. They die hard same as us. Theon shook his head. No. He'll mark this ship. He'll make for it. Jon's ship bore the direwolf banner because it had to. He had argued against such a thing and then ceased. There are things men see that are commands even when they don't mean to think of them that way. He had been a boy who had thought of his father as a banner. He knew how it worked. He'll come, Jon said, and put his glove on Ghost's head. The direwolf's ears went up. He shuddered and stilled. They set their nets. Thick rope and tarred line knotted with small iron anchors meant for river fish but able to bite at any plank that gave them the chance. They dragged them across the water where Godric's chart told the current would take a man who thought the wind his lover. Behind the nets, deeper into the shoals, they scattered casks of pitch roped together with lines just proud of floats, so that a man might see something and think he saw all. They set 3 lanterns on a spar in the water where there was no safe passage, and they hooded them so they would blink like a foolish signal. They left darkness where there was one crooked path through sandbars. The scouts faded. A new darkness drew. Men say the sea is a woman. At night she is a face without features. And in that place a man's mind draws a mouth and eyes upon her. Euron came on a black wind that was any wind the night had and any breath a man held while waiting to see if he would live. The first men to speak were the ones on the longships who saw the red bloom of Silence's sails when they opened them like a flower men would be killed to see. They made a sound like ham, airs, and then the scorpions sang. Bolts hissed. Some went to water with sounds like a knife thrown into sodden thatch. One took a man in the shoulder because he forgot his crouch. He grunted without words and fell to his knees and then rose and took the scorpion's tiller again with his other arm. The longships of Euron's van turned their bows like dogs lifting their muzzles to a scent they owned. Silence did not turn. She came straight. What does he know? Davos murmured. That he must come, Theon said. The Iron Fleet behind those first 3 narrowed the sea. Their lines were ragged and then not. They weren't a flock of birds. They were stones falling and finding their river's line, and every stone made the water a different water. Men on the Manderley cogs could hear the oars begin to bite in full measure. And within it, Silence came, with her crew faceless in the fog and their mouths all closed not by choice. Euron Greyjoy stood at her prow as if he had been born there, standing still, and everything else in the world had been made to slide past him so he could see it. His eye patch was a strip of shadow thrown by his cheekbone. His other eye was like something found in a depth and brought up too fast. He smiled. It was the smile of a man in a brothel who has been told there is a new trick to learn. "Now," Davos said. They let the frontmost net float free and then hauled it, quick and violent, so that it kinked and doubled back upon itself like a snake glimpsing its own tail. Silence fell into it with a sound like a saw biting bone. It was no more than a catch of an oar at first, and then it was three, and then the net took her under the keel where the tarline bit and the little iron anchors caught. She slowed and sheered. Her oars threshed at air and then water uselessly. Euron did not move, not even to sign to his men. He only lifted his head and looked at the lanterns hooded and unhooded beyond. "Damn him," Godric said. "He sees it. He sees us seeing it." "He'll cut through," Davos said. "Then we'll cut him again," Jon said, and lifted his glove. The drum at the mast gave 3 beats. The Manderley longship to starboard threw her own nets, and the Mormonts aboard her set their hooks into the rope with a will and hauled. Hands burning through wool, feet braced, teeth shown to no one. The tide, which had turned in a doggish mood, grabbed the net and made it a wall. Silence hid it and the wall took. Hooks came then from Silence, cast with the obscene grace of men who have thrown hooks at human flesh more often than eels. They clanged and skated and then found purchase. Iron-kissed oak, grapnels bit. A great bolt from a scorpion hammered a plank and stuck there with an awful dignity. It did not matter who had launched it. All things launched belonged to the sea in the end. "Bows!" Davos barked. The archers loosed and then again, and the first rank of Ironborn went down without speech and without a sound from those around them. Bolts answered, and one of the Mormont women grunted around a shaft in her thigh and sat down without looking at it, laughing like a man who has seen a trick worth coin. She broke the shaft, and stood, and lifted her shield. Then Euron moved. He did not shout. He flicked his wrist in the smallest gesture Jon had ever seen matter in a fight. Half his oars bit at once backwards, half forwards. The tillermen shifted, and Silence kissed the net at a new angle and writhed like an eel in a boy's hands. She came through and forward under such momentum that for a heartbeat it felt as though she had torn the sea and the net both and left a hole. Men forgot to breathe. Euron's smile did not change. He made it a small bow with his head, as if to thank the sea for remembering it owed him a favor. "Another," Jon said and signaled. The second net was there. No plan survives the sea, but there are plans it respects long enough to curse. Silence bit it and bit it harder. Her prow crossed the bow of Jon's cog so close Jon could have thrown a stone and struck Euron's face. The thought came to him, and he understood something old then. Why men in old songs had thrown stones when they had no arrows left. He did nothing. He kept very still. He looked into Euron's eye and saw himself there and did not enjoy the shape of him. "Bored," Davos said, without heat, without haste. It was as if he were telling men to draw a net with a good catch. The longship to port surged, the Mormonts howled, and hooks flew. Silence's men took them without curses and in silence. They boarded not as men board, but as men stepped from one stone to the next while crossing a winter brook. Steel said the words for them. Euron turned and walked his deck with the ease of a man crossing a soft lawn. He drew a long blade of good steel, not made of fancy and not of lesser iron. On his hip was a thing like a horn, delicately worked, and it did not matter if it could call dragons or only call goats. Its presence made men think of dragons, and that was good enough. He did not put it to his lips. He smiled broader and then less. The battle ceased to be lines. It ceased to be this net or that hook and became men in the fog meeting men and deciding which of them ought to see the sun. Jon did not board first. He was not a fool. He had men for that, and there are honors you keep for them if you wish the rest to take orders. He stood and watched how the fight tightened. He saw that the Ironborn did not cry out when cut. He saw that they were larger than men ought to be in winter. He saw that fear was a thing with teeth, but not those teeth. Fear bit his belly anyway. "Your Grace," Theon said, very soft at his side. "He will come to you if he thinks he is choosing it. Give him the choice. Jon nodded. Davos, turn us. In this? Davos said, happy as if given a toy. He signaled. Men loosed lines, hauled, threw sea anchors on one side and cut another free. The cog pivoted in its own wake, slowly, slowly, and then more surely as the tide took hold of the new weight and made of it something to play with. The prow that had been a bystander became a mouth. Silence was no longer crosswise but facing them. You tempt gods, Godric said with fondness. I have met a god, Jon said, his voice quiet. I was not impressed. Silence came. This time he saw Euron grin outright. This time he saw the black patch lift and there was an eye beneath it, very blue and very kind, the way water is kind when it is too cold to save you. He could not look at both eyes at once. It was a small thing, a trick of a man who liked tricks, and Jon refused it. He watched Euron's shoulders instead. He learned from a boy with a spear long ago that a man's shoulders tell true when his mouth lies. Euron's moved like a dancer's, as if he were telling a story with his blade. Grapnels bit. Men hauled. The world became a plank between two darknesses. Jon drew Longclaw, and it made that cat-like sound it always made when the scabbard opened for it, the steel that does not sound like steel. Ghost pushed his body against Jon's thigh until Jon's knee stung. Then the direwolf stepped onto the rail and leaped very lightly across. He went for Euron, and that was right and wrong both. Euron twisted as if his spine had too many joints, and the blade flicked down and kissed Ghost's shoulder and scored it. Ghost landed like snow falling and was gone into other men because he was white and the fog was white and blood was black in white fog. Jon took the rail and stepped onto Silence with both feet sure. Euron had 3 men between himself and Jon, and they did their jobs well. One came with a shield that was nothing but 2 planks pegged poorly. It broke under Longclaw the way a lie breaks when it meets a truth with patience. The man looked very surprised and then not at all. The second had an axe and wanted to cleave Jon from shoulder to navel, but Longclaw took the haft and bit it and left it 2 hafts. The third was a big man with a cudgel wrapped in wire. He swung his cudgel and Jon went inside the ark, stamped his foot, and drove Longclaw's pommel into the man's mouth. Teeth went away like small white birds. Then Euron was there. He smelled of salt and something sweet and wrong. Up close, he did not look like a man who had never slept. He looked like a man who slept whenever he wished and in any position and upon anything and always woke rested. He did not lift his blade high. He flicked it. Longclaw had killed men with a weight like the winter moon. Euron's sword would have killed men if it were only a reed. They met with a little kiss of a sound. Jon felt something run up his arms that was not fear and was not joy and was not pain. He stepped and Euron stepped. Their faces were very close. Little crow, Euron said. His voice was gentle. Did you come to see if your steel is truer than mine? I came to stop you, Jon said. Oh, I will be stopped, Euron said, cheerful. We all are. Men think there is a ship without a shore somewhere, if only they buy enough charts. There is not. I have looked. He feinted left and then not, and a hook panicked in Jon's mind and then quieted. He parried and did not overreach.
Euron grinned.
Good boy. Ghost came low, out of fog, and struck one of Euron's men behind the knee with a sound like tearing cloth. Euron did not look. He did not move his eyes at all. He moved his wrist. His blade tip drew a little line on Jon's pauldron. It was a small cut, nothing. It made Jon's skin crawl. He understood then why men said Euron had 2 men in him, one that made a show and one that made a plan. It was not that at all. It was that Euron made the show into the plan, and if you only looked at the show you would think the plan was mad. Jon did not look at the show. He looked at the deck, at the slickness, at the net line underfoot, at the angle of the mast, at the way Silence's weight now shifted because her stern had grounded just enough on a soft bar they could not see. He saw the little list that told him how much of her was not free. He saw that Euron did not consider it. He considered only the blade. Jon stepped. He let his foot slide just so. He put a knee to the wet wood and let his head go lower than any knight had told him a head should go when he had a helm on it. Euron's blade hissed over and nipped a strand of Jon's hair and did not find what Euron wanted it to find. Jon answered with long claw up and from below. The blade sang. He felt it bite and skip. Euron's grin changed. It went very small. He looked down and saw a cut in his leather. It had not gone to meat. He looked at Jon and then laughed in honest pleasure. "Better," he said. "Again." They went again. The world shrank to their blades and to the drums that beat somewhere, as if in a village a festival had begun that would not end with human merriment. Jon felt tiredness come and slide off him like rain. He felt a cold under all other colds. He felt something else. Something like pity for a man who had lived so much in himself he no longer cared if anything else was real. He pressed. He drew blood from Euron's forearm. It was human blood. It pleased him in a simple way that asked no questions. Then the world widened because a scorpion on the Manderley cog fired a bolt into the place where Silence's mast foot was wedged to its step. The sound was like the name of a mountain. Euron and Jon both moved, and neither of them moved because he feared the bolt. They moved because that sound told them how the ship was going to fall. She healed. Men went down and some rose and some did not. The net lines that had snared her bit deeper into her belly. Another longship, Manderley painted and full of men who knew the smell of bear, slammed into Silence's flank and men poured like grain into a hopper. The fight was no longer Euron's private sport. Euron's eyes changed. Jon saw something there like surprise, but not that. It was an old thing, older than Euron, recognition that the sea had joined the other side. Euron said something in a language Jon did not know, and it was not a prayer. He looked at the horn on his hip and did not touch it. He put 2 fingers into his mouth and made a whistle that cut through men like a bolt from a scorpion. His men moved. They did not think. They moved because he had told them some time long ago, and they had been waiting to hear that whistle again all their lives. Hooks were cut. Lines were cast. Silence shrugged like a horse that had allowed boys to play at rider and now was bored with boys. She lurched. She came away from the Manderley longship like a tooth taken raw. She did not free entirely. She still had one net around her hind part and it dragged. It dragged like an old woman's grief, making sorrow of every step. Euron put 2 fingers to his lips again and whistled twice. His men went to oars as if in dance. Rage went through Jon as if someone had pushed a cold iron deep into the coals of his heart. It was no man's fault. It was nothing to do with honor. It was everything to do with the fact that this man made men move like that when he wished. "Davos," Jon said. "I?" Davos answered from somewhere near his left. His voice calm as a man telling beads. "I see it. Cut her," Jon said. It took an ugly courage to do it, the kind that men do not sing about because it makes songs foul. The longship that had her let her go. The Mormonts cut their own grapnels and curses, and the ship careened away with a hollow groan. The Scorpion crews shifted their aim as if the machine were a hunting cat they had to pull by the scruff. They fired in quick succession, 3 bolts, thack, thack, thack. The first 2 kissed air. The third took the horn on Euron's hip. It did not break. Jon had not thought it would. It spun like a child and then settled and lay. Euron looked down. Euron looked up. Euron lifted his blade as if to salute the scorpion, which has no love and no pride and did not care, and then he shouted. Not a word, but a sound that cracked his men's backs like whips they had been waiting for. Silence backed water. Her prow ground. Something below gave. The net line went out under sudden strain with a song that could have been a charred harp. She came half free, and in coming half free, she turned her own flank to the shoal Jon and Godric and Theon had saved for men like this and had prayed themselves wrong about the chance of him finding it. She grated. She stuck. She lodged herself with a finality like marriage. "Bored," Davos cried. "Bored, you cold sons of she-bears and mermen." The Mormonts had needed no asking. They went like the tide and left men standing where they had stood because the tide had made them fools. The sister men used boar spear hooks and plucked men from the sea as one plucks fish from a weir. Theon moved among them with a short sword and no shield, and his face was an open thing that said nothing except that it wished to do a job and be done with it, and there is no clean way to do jobs like that. He met a man twice his size, and in half the time it takes to speak that thought, he had his blade through the man's groin and then his throat. He did not grin. He did not think. He worked. Euron fought as a cat fights when backed into a corner that is not truly a corner because the cat has corners you do not understand. He stepped on a fallen man's chest without cruelty, and used the little lift to bring his blade around in an arc that should not have worked in fog and on a deck listing like a tavern floor. He took a manderly man under the chin and gave him a smile he could wear forever. He moved his left hand, and a knife that had been hiding in his sleeve joined the party without asking permission. He put that in a Mormont woman's armpit because her shield left that space open when she raised it to shout. He never stopped smiling fully except once. That once was when Jon came again. Longclaw was heavy as winter and quick as answers. Jon went in 2 steps, rolled his wrist, and made a cut that was not where it looked as if it would be. Euron caught it on the flat and his blade split sportingly, and he did not worry about that. He let his blade be and took his knife up and spun it and met Longclaw a hand's width from his throat. He had time to make a little noise with his tongue that could have been appreciation. Jon put his shoulder in. The 2 blades locked. Their faces were close again. Euron's breath smelled of bad dreams and mint. He pushed and Jon did not give. Ghost came from behind and sank his teeth into a mute's thigh, so the mute finally made a sound. And it surprised other mutes and pleased Ghost. "You make good war," Euron said. "You would like the world if you could be the only good man in it. But there are stories, Little Crow. There are winds. There are." "Shut up," Jon said, and he meant it without cruelty. He twisted his wrist the way a fisherman twists a knot when he wants his line to bite, and Longclaw slid free of the kiss the knife had held it in and went up through Euron's sleeve and came away with a line of meat that looked nothing like meat because blood looks different in fog. Euron did not say anything then. He stepped back 1 and was lost behind 2 of his men, who went forward as if they had been struck by a thought that had to be acted upon. Jon took one and then the other. He stepped up again. Silence groaned again. Something in her guts gave way. Some tree nail or chalk. She was not going anywhere. Euron turned his head as if listening and then smiled once more. He leapt for the rail in a simple way a child might, and men who could not speak made a sound like a cheer without voice. He grabbed a line, swung, and landed on the yard. He ran along the yard as easily as a man runs along a fence. He reached the far end and dropped to the deck of a daughter ship that had crept alongside like a pickpocket. 3 men followed him. 7 fell trying. "Coward." Theon spat, breath ragged. "No," Davos said, and there was a stern respect in it. "Sailor." They took silence. It took an hour that lasted a year. In that hour, men died without time to think their last thoughts pretty. Men lived who would not keep their lives clean. Ghost found his way back to Jon at last and put his head against Jon's hanging hand as if it were a thing Ghost knew had to happen now or else something would be wrong forever. Jon let his fingers knot in that rime-white fur. He felt warm, and then the warmth went away and left only the cold that was honest. Euron was gone into the fog. His fleet was not destroyed. It had been cut. It had learned a thing about the sisters it would not forget. It had had its best pride taken from it and kept like a tooth on a string. The longships that could not free themselves from the shoals burned and made colors in fog that no priest would bless. The longships that could fled. Euron's daughter ship vanished into one of the many mouths night and tide discover when men are not looking. When morning came, it came with a light that refused to brighten. The fog burned off in tatters, and the sisters stood sharp as knives against the cold sky. White Harbor's cogs rode at anchor where the water was honest. The harbor fires burned welcome. Men counted. The lists were longer than Wyman liked and shorter than Jon had feared, which is how such lists always are when a man has taken his own counsel and not asked gods to make the world easier than it is. The deck of silence was a butcher's table. Manderly men moved among the mutes, binding those who lived and putting knives into those who looked they might live only to make more trouble. Theon sat on a coil of rope and held his hands in front of him, as if perhaps they were a baby that needed warming. His eyes were on nothing. Jon sat beside him. After a time, Theon said, "I have seen him go like that before. He will not sleep for 2 days, and then he will sleep for a day and rise like a man who does not admit he is man." "I have seen dead men rise," Jon said. He did not know why he said it. Theon looked at him then with, what? Curiosity. I have seen dead men rise, Jon said again, quieter. He is better than that. It makes him worse. Theon nodded once, as if a shopkeeper had named a fair price. He will come again. I know, Jon said. Theon looked at the horn where it lay, scuffed and dignified still. That will please him, he said. It will give him something to tell himself while he waits. Wyman came in an hour later when men had begun to think only of warmth and the next thing. He stepped over bodies as a courtesy to the dead. He was too large to step anywhere without bumping something, but he made himself smaller with gentleness, and he made it well. He looked at the horn as a merchant looks at an object that is priced not with coin but with blood. We shall not blow that, he said. Davos snorted. I have no wish to cook my lungs from the inside to see if a child with wings will shy at the sound. I have always believed dragons are better left to their own songs, Wyman said. He looked at Jon, and his face had lost fat that day and might never gain it back. Your Grace, there are 20 ships need patching and 10 need prayers. There are men who will not eat again, and there are men who will not stop eating at the memory of them. There is White Harbor, which remains. The North remembers. He looked to the sisters. And the sisters remember whom they like. Godric will pretend no favor, and yet he will remember this day fondly, and his grandchildren will sell stories about it to sailors until the end of time, and I will charge a small tax. Godric, who had appeared like a seal whenever coin was mentioned, smiled. Are you a priest, Wyman, to hear confessions in coin? I am a sinner, Wyman said. If I were a priest, I would have to pretend I was not. Ghost leaned his weight against Jon again. There was blood on the direwolf's shoulder, dried now, and Jon's hand came away red when he stroked. He felt sudden fear, as sharp and kind as a friend who tells you when you are a fool. He turned and saw that the cut was long but not deep. Ghost looked at him, and the look was not that of a dog. Jon nodded, and the beast put his head back down and gave a huff like a boy about to sleep try not to. In the days that followed, they towed silence toward White Harbor at a pace that would not shame a funeral. Men on the quays stopped work to watch, and men on the walls leaned out, and women put hands to mouths, and children laughed, because children laugh when they do not know if crying would be proper. Wyman ordered that the ship's name not be scraped from her stern. There are silences that should speak, he said. Let this one do it. Word goes in winter like fire in summer, quick and trying all the old paths and finding which ones men have left clean. Ravens went from White Harbor to Winterfell and to Deepwood Motte and to Last Hearth and to Bear Island. And the words written on the parchment said no boast, but only that the kraken had learned the sisters had claws, and that the wolf had learned the sea's taste, and it was bitter and honest and would be swallowed again if need be. Men in the hills who did not love ships marked their blades and thought perhaps their sons after them would go south and see the water flat to the world. The sister men made oaths that had the shape of bargains and bargains that had the shape of oaths. In inns from Sisterton to the Wolf's Den, men spoke of a ship taken from a madman who had 2 eyes and 1 eye and no eyes and 3. Men speak so when they do not know how to speak and wish to be speaking all the same. Euron did not show himself. His fleet was seen 2 days later like fish in a river that has stones thrown into it. It broke, merged, slid into the mists, teased, then nothing. The wind swung north and the mists sank to the water's mouth and froze there. The S.A. capping itself with ice that cracked under the weight of gulls. Jon stood in the merman's court with Wyman and Davos and Godric and Theon, and a map lay between them that had new marks on it made in a hand that was neither clerkly nor drunken, and that was Davos's hand. There were circles where fires had been seen, lines where nets had come up with strange weeds, an X where a man had fallen, and the X had 2 lines through it to say that man was a friend. War makes maps into diaries men do not keep because they cannot bear to, and Davos had kept one for them because he knew no other way to count. We could pursue, Theon said. We could chase him to Old Wyke, and there. I know those coasts. You know their prayers too, Godric said, not unkindly. I know their prayers, Theon said. They do not know mine. Wyman looked at Jon. The room was warm, meat smell, smoke, the clean sharp of pine. But Jon felt the cold under it, a foundation. He thought of the dead he had seen with blue eyes, and he thought of Euron's eye. He thought of men who had gone to the bottom without words and men whose words had gone to the bottom without men. He thought of the sea as a road and of winter as a hand around men's throats. He thought of White Harbor and of Winterfell and of children. He thought of ghosts and of Ghost. "No," Jon said. "We hold. We mend. We show him he cannot pull us where he likes. We will not be his storm." Davos nodded once. "Aye," he said simply. "He wants us to come. The sea's long, and our anger will rot there before it finds him. There will be other times." "Other times," Wyman murmured. "Other breakfasts, other debts. The North remembers." He opened a ledger and dipped his pen. Theon stood a long time without moving. Then he said, "I do not know what to do when I am not fighting him." "Live," Jon said. Theon's mouth twisted. "I do not know if I am good at that." "Most men are not," Jon said. "We try anyway." They did. The winter did not make men kind, but it made them remember what they had. And when nets went out, they came back with fish that looked surprised to find themselves still in a world where men fought over anything so small as a silver coin or a dry plank or a dry place to lie their heads. Silence lay at the quay like a beast sleeping with one eye open, and men would not pass her without touching wood as if to make peace with something. Children ran along her deck and were cuffed. Then men ran their hands along her rail and were not cuffed. The horn went to a chest under 3 locks in a room with no window, and 2 men slept outside its door. No one came to take it. Men still spoke of Euron Greyjoy at night, and by day they spoke of nets. On a morning when the cold was such that men did not want to move their faces lest they split, a cutter came out of the fog with a rag for a sail, and her crew pitched their voices over the water as sailors do when they wish to seem like old friends arriving. They had a boy with them who had hair like straw and hands like a lord's. They had a woman who had an eye like the sea and another that had seen too much. They had a tale of small matters dressed as big and big matters dressed as small. They had nothing of Euron. They had everything else. The world is like that. Jon stood on the quay with Ghost pressed against his leg, and the wind cut through his fur and iron as if they were clothes on a scarecrow. He looked at the sea and felt nothing mystical. He felt the weight of rope and of men and of what men ask of one another when gods are silent. He thought of being a boy on a cliff. He thought of being a man on a deck. He thought of the North that remembers, and of the sea that does not care, and of a kraken whose pride had bled, and would bleed again or not at all according to winds no man could own. He turned to go. Ghost trotted a pace ahead, and Jon looked once over his shoulder. Out beyond the last floe, where the sea was black glass, a shape moved and then not. Could have been a whale. Could have been a seal. It could have been the idea of a ship. Could have been nothing at all. He laughed then, softly, so that only Ghost heard him. The direwolf's ears flicked. Jon put a hand on the beast's back, and they went back into the work of winter. Euron Greyjoy stood that night on a low I'll know map marked because men did not care to mark a place that had nothing to trade. He had a fire. He had 3 men sleeping by it who would wake when he wished them to and not before. He had a bottle with nothing left in it worth drinking. He had his arm wrapped in a cloth that smelled of the inside of things. He looked at the sky and saw nothing he had not seen before, and he smiled. He felt his boat thump and knew by the thump that the tide had turned and would make a path where there had not been one for 3 hours. He stood and stretched and made a little noise that might have been a word if there was anyone to speak it to. Then he went to his boat, and the boat took him, and the sea took the boat, and that was the story it told that night. In White Harbor the bells were silent because it was too cold for bells to speak without cracking their throats. In the Merman's court, Wyman wrote names and numbers and then stopped and looked at the fire. Davos dozed in a chair the way old sailors doze in chairs, which is to say poorly and with one eye that is not an eye always open. Godric sat with his boots off near the door and rubbed his toes as if they were coins. Theon stood in a passage and put his head against the stone and made no sound. Jon slept and did not dream, which was the best gift winter gave him in that season. In the morning they would count. In the evening they would plan. Men would mend things and break them again and mend them again. More ravens would go. The sea would lie and tell the truth by turns. The North would remember. And some miles off, where the water was deeper and more honest in its cruelty, Euron would move in a starless way, his smile lending light where the world gave none. and he would think of Silence's deck under his feet and the feel of a sword that bites like a wolf and of a boy with dark hair who did not look at his eye when he should have, and he would be pleased to have been hurt. He would plan to be pleased again. Jon woke at dawn and found ice on his beard from his breath. He went out onto the quay. Men nodded to him without titles because their mouths were tight with cold, and he nodded back without mind to courtesy because his was too. He looked out again and saw the sea had made itself new in the night, and he thought, not for the last time, that it was a good thing to have enemies who were flesh and blood and had to bleed if they wished to make their case. He smiled then, not as Euron smiled but as men do when they see a long road and shoes in fair repair. He wished for fewer roads and more fires. Then he turned away, and Ghost padded with him, and White Harbor went about its winter day with the particular stubbornness of a city that makes its living from water and believes, foolish and true, that it will do so forever. The nets went out. The nets came back. Somewhere a child saw Silence and asked what she was called, and his mother told him Silence, and she made the sign of the merman over her heart and pushed the child on so his eyes would not linger. The day passed. The light went like a man reluctant to leave a good meal. In the merman's court, Davos spoke of anchors and ropes, and Godric spoke of channels, and Theon spoke less, and when he did it was like a man reading from a page he had burned and remembered anyway. Jon listened. He did not picture Euron's face when he thought of war. He pictured the shoals. He pictured nets. He pictured how you keep a city when the sea would rather have it. He made his plans with that in him, and he was not bored. Out at sea, Euron watched a gull turn and thought of brothers and of useless prayers. He licked his lips and tasted salt and something like iron and something like joy. He steered a course that would make a story. He had always preferred to make his stories upon other men's backs. He would again. But for the first time in a long time, he had learned a story not of his own making, and he found that delightful. The sisters had claws. The wolf had come onto his sea with a step too sure for a boy from a forest. It pleased him that the world still dared such things. It gave him permission to be bolder. He hummed. The sea did not hum with him. The sea is no man's chorus. It goes its own way, and whether men drown or lunch, it does not mind. The stars hid behind cloud and the world narrowed, and that was the way he liked it, because it made men think of the next wave and not of the wave that would come after. He thought of the next wave and of the one after, and he thought of a horn in a chest under lock, and he thought of the sound it would not make tonight, and he was content. In White Harbor, Jon stood again on Silence's deck. He watched men not rope. He watched Mormont's arm wrestle with a seriousness that would have made a maester laugh and a sailor put coin on it. He watched Theon turn his eyes toward the sea as though it might put something back into him it had taken long ago without apology. He watched Ghost lift his head and taste the air. He watched the world be what it was and not ask any man's leave. He leaned his hands on the rail, and the wood felt less like a weapon now and more like a thing that had chosen to live. He found that good. He lifted his face to the wind. It was very cold. He smiled, small and true, and the wind took that smile and did nothing with it. That too was right. There would be other days. There would be more fights. There would be nets and ropes and men's lives and men's deaths and the work of keeping what could be kept from the winter and the sea. The wolf had outmaneuvered the kraken at sea. That was a tale now, and it would change in the telling. It would do the work tales do. Keep men warm and make them brave and make them foolish in measures they could not balance before frost claimed them. Jon did not think of the tale. He thought of the next thing and the next. He closed his eyes and remembered the look in Euron's eye when the ship had taken the shoal and would not come free. He opened them, and the sea was the same as it had been an hour past. He took a breath deep enough to hurt and did not mind that hurt. He turned away and went into the business of kingship, which is the business of men with hands and scars, not of crowns, and of waiting without letting waiting eat you. Out in the bight, a wind sprang up from the west. Men in boats trimmed their sails without thinking of why. On a low isle no one cared for, a small fire gave up pretending it was more than embers and went to ash. In the sisters, Godric counted and rounded and counted again and found himself richer than he had been at dawn and, miraculously, less inclined to boast about it. At Winterfell, a raven arrived and was read by eyes that recognized Jon's hand before they read his words. and a woman smiled with the corner of her mouth as if tasting something she had been owed. The North remembered. The sea did not. Between them, men taught one another how to survive.